Sunday, December 12th, 1937. 1. She looked outside the main room window again, from her home on the second floor of a small, old building in a narrow alley. Looking through clusters of tiny, reddish plum blossom buds from the prune tree which stood in the yard, she could see a section of Sun Yat-sen Boulevard North in the distance. The view would have been blocked if it had not been for an opening between two crumbled buildings, like a gap between two front teeth. She had been standing by the window for hours on end during the last several days, watching flames going up the Popo Mountain, watching streams of rickshaws, squeaky donkey-drawn cars, overloaded automobiles honking incessantly, men dragging oversized trunks and suitcases behind them, porters burdened with huge bundles bobbing from carrying poles, mothers with crying babies, small children leading half-blind grandparents, soldiers in dirty, ragged uniforms, the mingled faces or arms in blood-stained bandages, a roiling human torrent of uncertainty and fear. Every now and then sirens would awaken and pierce the air, and before bombs fell from warplanes with the rising sun on their wings, people run for cover like panic-stricken rabbits, tripping over fallen bodies, screaming for their very lives. It was a week ago when a bomb fell onto the corner eatery, claiming the lives of Uncle Liu's family and wounding several others. When she crawled out from under Grandpa's bed after the bombers had flown past, she saw a gaping hole in the thin window glass, an expensive circle of jagged shards. She applied a sheet of Grandpa's delicate white rice paper to cover up the broken window. Bombs had been falling from the sky since August, reducing untold numbers of homes into naked, tottering walls, blasting newborn babies into orphanhood at their mothers' bosoms. This morning, however, it seemed eerily quiet. The boulevard was virtually deserted. The human flood had trickled down to an occasional bicycle and a hurried pedestrian now and then. Ningning turned her gaze into the distance. The sun was about to burst forth from behind Popo Mountain, its fiery rays dispersing the early morning mist which clung to the mountain slopes, slowly turning the sky into a blazing scarlet red. The mountain looked less majestic than she had remembered it to be even yesterday. A few flames could still be seen, while smoke curled upward in the morning air. A cough came from the room where Grandpa lay. Ningning closed the window and turned to walk across the main room toward his room. Eyes closed, his silvery head swung slightly to punctuate the cadence of his morning ritual, the beads of the rosary filing through his quivering fingers. Grandpa was lost in another world. The cotton-padded coat, which was supposed to be spread across his chest to ward off the cold, had fallen to the floor. Hearing her footsteps, Lucky, in the bamboo cage on the nightstand, hopped about excitedly. Resting against the edge of Grandpa's bed, Ningning took the coat and spread it gently across his chest. Grandpa stopped murmuring, released the rosary, and took her hands in his own. "Grandpa, you're not very warm," she said. "I'm all right," replied Grandpa. But she could hear a faint whistling in his voice. Grandpa had been bed-ridden for almost 3 months now. It had happened all of a sudden. One August afternoon, she came back from a visit to Eva's school at Jingling College for Women and found him sprawled on the floor, saliva dripping from his mouth. Suspecting the worst, she screamed and ran downstairs to get help. Auntie Huang, the landlady, hurried up, put her hand close to his nostrils, and felt his pulse. "Grandpa is still alive," she pronounced. "I'll go and get a doctor." With the help of Auntie Huang and the other kind neighbors, Ningning had managed to be an effective little nurse for Grandpa. After weeks of being spoon-fed dark brown herb juices and having long sharp needles inserted all over his body, Grandpa didn't become completely paralyzed. But he couldn't do the things he used to enjoy doing anymore. Practicing brushwork at the dining table with a pot of a freshly brewed green tea within reach, going to his favorite shrine to burn incense and offer a sacrifice, and especially taking Ningning to the market near the Temple of Confucius to see exotic birds and precious rainflower stones. Incontestable evidence of Grandpa's illness was the presence of a long, rectangular, ominously black wooden box wedged between the lower end of his bed and the wall. The ugliest, most hideous thing she had ever seen. It had taken 6 neighbors to carry it up the narrow stairway and place it in his small bedroom. Grandpa wanted to be prepared. Ningning couldn't connect that thing with Grandpa. She couldn't picture Grandpa lying in it, being carried away and buried deep underground somewhere. She couldn't imagine not seeing his kind face and hearing his tremulous chanting again. "Are you hungry, Grandpa?" she asked. "No," soon followed by, "A little. I'll go and make breakfast." As Ningning turned, Lucky hopped about in the cage again. "Trying to catch my attention?" She stopped. Lucky cocked his little head to one side, fixed his gaze on her, his beady eyes reflecting a curious, childlike expectancy. "Sing me a song, kiddo," she said, bending closer to Lucky, "and I'll feed you first. Promise." Lucky cocked his head again, flapped his wings a few times, and crooned. His voice was high, rich, and melodious. "Isn't he something, Grandpa?" she giggled. "Yes, he's quite a singer." Grandpa's face beamed. Ningning went to the kitchen, removed the lid on a vat in the corner, took a teaspoon of rice, and returned to Grandpa's room. Lucky hopped and twittered when she dropped the rice into a small wooden saucer inside the cage. Grandpa turned to watch Lucky pecking at the rice in the saucer. Water and electricity had been shut off since yesterday. Luckily, she had saved 2 vats of water in the kitchen. It would last for a week or 2 if they used it wisely. She lifted the pot from the stove and noticed a faint red glow inside the hole she had made in the middle of the charcoal brick. The coal was still alive. Squatting, she picked up a small metal bar, slid open the vent door near the bottom of the stove, and worked to shake down the dead cinders. A gust of dry, dusty air swept over her face when she stood up to add a few pieces of new coal into the stove. She coughed. "Are you all right?" Grandpa called out from his room. "Yeah," she said, wiping her eyes and nose with her sleeve. She poured a handful of rice into a bowl, washed it once, poured it into another small metal pot, added hot water to the pot, and placed it on the stove. Soon the pot began to hum. She sprinkled a pinch of salt into a cup of water and rinsed her mouth, then splashed some more water on her face. After that, she walked into her parents' room to get her mother's mirror and comb. Their bedroom occupied about 2/3 of the interior room and was separated from her own by a wall of thin boards and a door. They hadn't slept in it for so long. When would they be coming back? She placed the mirror on the windowsill and began to fix her hair. She remembered again how Mama used to take pleasure in combing her long, shining hair, weaving it into 2 fine braids with her nimble fingers, and finishing it off with a pink or purple butterfly knot on top of her head. Whenever Mama went to visit Papa, wherever he happened to be, Grandpa would have to fix her hair in the morning, but he could not do it nearly as good as Mama. How many years had it been? Now that Ningning was older, she had been doing her own hair, even when Mama was home. Ningning looked at the girl in the mirror. She had large eyes sparkling under long, exquisite eyelashes. Her nose was small but straight, and her lips and mouth were like a fresh red cherry. The little scar on her forehead was barely visible unless looked at closely. She smiled, pouted, and made a face at the girl. "Vanity is a vice," she said, mimicking Grandpa's stern voice and pointing a finger at the girl's nose. A hissing noise came from the kitchen. She lifted the pot lid just in time to prevent it from spilling over. Inside the pot, a thin, creamy rice congee was beginning to take shape. She moved the vent door 3/4 down. For breakfast, Ningning used to walk to the corner eatery and buy a big bowl of tender bean curd pudding for her and Grandpa from Uncle Liu, who would garnish with a spoonful of some spicy sauce to make it tasty. Now the Lius were gone, and the eatery was nothing but a few torturing walls. "Ningning," Grandpa called. "Come in." She hurried to Grandpa's room. "You want to get up? Breakfast will be ready in a minute." "Okay. Put your hand on my shoulder like before," she instructed. Grandpa removed his jacket and the quilt underneath and began to move his legs to the edge of the bed. Ningning could feel the weight of his trembling hand on her shoulder, her right hand supporting Grandpa's back, her left hand guiding his long, weak legs to the pair of cotton-padded shoes on the floor. A few painstaking moments later, Grandpa was on his feet. He gasped for air. "Are you all right, Grandpa?" she asked. When they finally sat down to eat in the main room, Grandpa's bowl of congee and his spoon trembled in his hands. He tried to go slowly so that the spoon would not miss his mouth. "Grandpa," Ningning giggled, "you've got rice on your mustache." "Really?" Grandpa put down the spoon and tried to brush off the sticky rice with his fingers, but he only made it into a bigger mess. "Let me get it off for you, Grandpa," she laughed. "Grandpa is getting useless now," he sighed, while she cleaned his mustache with a towel. "You are not," Ningning said when she finished. "See how good you look this morning." She turned to reach for the mirror on the windowsill. "No," he protested. "Grandpa has no use for that anymore." "Okay," Ningning said as they continued to eat. "But you really look good this morning. Trying to make me feel better, aren't you?" "I can swear to—" "No," Grandpa coughed, his face wrinkled. "No talking while eating or you'll choke." Ningning hurried to Grandpa's side and patted him in the back. "Better?" Grandpa shook his head, still coughing. "You should have gone." "Where? To the lower pass dock?" That would have meant getting on a ship that would take her to Papa's folks or even some distant relatives. But Grandpa didn't like the idea of a 12-year-old girl traveling by herself. Go with Eva? Grandpa had said when her best friend came and told them about the safety zone established by a few foreigners in Nanking. Ningning had shaken her head. "Go with Auntie Huang then," Grandpa had urged when the landlady came up the day before yesterday and offered to take Ningning with her. Ningning had refused. "Why are you so stubborn?" It was the first time she had seen Grandpa lose his temper in such a way. "I don't want to leave you behind alone here," she said as she stormed out of Grandpa's room. "Don't you worry, Grandpa," Ningning said when Grandpa finally stopped coughing. "The Japanese would be too busy to worry about a little kid like me." Grandpa sighed and shook his head one last time. "You are still a kid indeed." "See how quiet is it this morning?" Ningning said, looking up from her bowl. "I hope it'll be so for a while," Grandpa mumbled, chewing slowly. Muffled sound of explosions rumbled in the distance. Machine guns rattled. Ningning jumped up from her stool and opened the window. The sound came louder, closer. The floor under her feet quivered, so did the bowls and spoons on the dining table. "It's from Purple Mountain," she reported, "and from the south, too." When she closed the window, the glass shards and the rice paper cover buzzed together uneasily in the wind. They must be pounding those gates very hard today, mumbled Grandpa. She sat down next to Grandpa, putting her hands in his. Grandpa seemed to be shaking. If only Mama and Papa were home now, they would know what to do. It was in July when Mama was leaving for Shanghai, and she had wanted to take Ningning with her. Ningning hadn't seen Papa for almost a year by then, and it was summer recess after all. However, with the imminent Japanese attack on Shanghai so much on people's minds, Mama had decided against the idea at the last minute. It would be safer to leave Ningning with Grandpa in Nanking, she said. Ningning, murmured Grandpa. Yes? Are you scared? No, but she knew she was. At the very least, she was worried. Good. Now listen. We need to be prepared. How? First, food and water. We have saved up some water and that bag of steamed buns you told me to buy a few days ago. Good. We have also a bit of rice crust and some leftover rice I cooked last night. Grandpa nodded. Now go and gather all the food we have in a box. We need to hide it. Why? She knew the answer, of course. Ningning went to the kitchen and busied herself there. When she came back with an old cotton filled with all the food she had found, she could feel moisture on the tip of her nose. Where should I hide it? She asked, feeling the weight in her arms. Mama's room? No, my room. Your room? It's so bare, and that's exactly why. Underneath my bed, nobody would look there. She carried the cotton to Grandpa's room, crawled under his bed, and pushed it to the furthermost, darkest corner. Lucky hopped about in the cage when she re-emerged from under the bed. It'll be all right, she bent nearer to the bird. Promise. Another round of explosions and machine guns fire in the distance. Lucky tilted his head, his shiny beady eyes looking into her own, as if somewhat skeptical of her ability to prophesy. It'll be quiet again soon, kiddo, she reassured. Grandpa was chanting at the dining table, eyes closed, when she returned. Now go get your mirror and scissors. Why? Your hair. She had seen young women and girls wearing short hair. Eva's hair was short, just long enough to cover her earlobes. Most of the Ningning college students wore their hair short too, with the ear-length hair dressed in their white blouses and black skirts. These girls looked so modern. Give me the scissors, Grandpa said when she came back from her room. She moved her stool closer to Grandpa and sat down. Grandpa held a lock of her hair in his quivering fingers. You know what, Grandpa? Let me do it myself. She stood up and took the scissors from Grandpa. Haven't I done a good job trimming your mustache? When she gripped a lock of hair from the back of her head and aimed the tips of the scissors at it, Ningning felt a lump in her throat. She hesitated and then began to cut. Give it to me, Grandpa said when she was about to throw the first cut on the floor. Grandpa? She giggled. Yes. Okay. She placed the hair in Grandpa's hand. He looked so happy. Ningning began to apply the scissors all over her head, paused now and then to check herself in the mirror. Messier than a sparrow's nest turned inside out by some mischievous boy. Papa and Mama, Auntie Huang, the twins, Eva, just about all her school friends would have to laugh their teeth off when they saw her. Mama would probably cry too. Ningning felt sourness rushing up her nose. It'll grow back, Grandpa murmured. She kept her eyes on the girl in the mirror without saying a word. Before you know it. I know, she acknowledged grudgingly. Now your face. What about it? She was unhappy now. We have to. But why should I make myself look ugly? You'll understand when you grow up. I'm already grown up. I cook and wash and clean and do 100 other. You are still a little girl. If you say so, Grandpa. She got up and began to walk in the direction of the kitchen. Not there, Grandpa said. We don't use soup? No, that's too crude for my Ningning. Go get my writing set. Okay. She spun around and practically danced toward Grandpa's room. She came back with a brush, an ink slab, and several ink sticks. One of the ink sticks exuded such an exquisite fragrance as if all the plum blossoms on the twigs outside suddenly bloomed. It was a gift from Papa, and Grandpa had used it only once. It was too precious to use it too often, Grandpa had said. That one would be perfect for you, but we are not going to use it? No. Why? She was disappointed. She sort of knew why, but not quite. How about this one? She picked up an ink stick Grandpa had used for practicing his brushwork. It had an unpleasant smell, but didn't stink, like the cheap ones some of her classmates used at school. Grandpa nodded. She got a small cup of water, poured a small amount onto the slab, and began to gently rub the chosen ink stick against the slab in a circular motion. She had never worn any makeup before. You're too young for it, Mama had said one morning several years ago when she stood by the windowsill watching Mama applying some white powder on her face. Was she old enough now? Perhaps still too young? Mama would say, but old enough to have to wear a different kind of makeup now for a very different purpose? Grandpa started with her left eye. The tip of the chivalry brush moved around the eyelids slowly. It had a cool, ticklish feel. She giggled. Sit still, Grandpa commanded. She could hear the whoosing sound in Grandpa's breathing. When Grandpa had finished around her eyes, nose, and mouth, Ningning wanted to have a look in the mirror. We're not through yet, Grandpa sounded annoyed. Just a quick look. She looked like the Monkey King in Peking opera. If she only could be the Monkey King. If she could just pull out a tiny needle-like stick from her ear, say some magic word, and it would grow into an enormous 1,000 jinpo instantly. She would wield it and charge headlong into the enemy, whatever they happened to be, and they would all fall on their knees, prostrate themselves before her, and beg for their lives. Or she could pluck a single hair from her head, give it one gentle puff of air, and an army of baby monkey kings would leap from her open palm, waving their little magic weapons, and chase the enemy away. Or short of both, she could at least drag a big circle with a magic bow and create a safety zone of her own. She would invite just about everybody she knew to come in. All the good people, of course. No bad people, and not even bombs dropped from the sky could hurt anybody inside the circle. Wouldn't that be nice? A tremendous explosion rumbled in the distance. Machine guns crackled. The window glass and rice paper burst. Let's finish quick, Grandpa's brush danced across her face. It was all covered in ink now. She could picture what she looked like without the mirror. There was no time for that anyway. Finally, Grandpa put the brush down. One last thing, Ningning. We're not through? Not yet. A place to hide. Under your bed? No. Mama's room? Mama's closet is big. That's the last place you want to hide. Where then? My room. Grandpa's room? If not under his bed, where else? That ugly, hideous thing in the corner? No way. Oh no, Grandpa. Yes, there was firmness in his gentle voice. You're not kidding. She almost laughed. No. Grandpa, it would be so dark in there. There would be no air for her to breathe. She would be scared to death before being killed by anyone. She was too young to be buried alive in that ugly, hideous thing. Besides, it was for Grandpa. Yes, Grandpa sighed. Nobody would look in there. What about, she hasted. With things going on like this, Grandpa murmured, I may not need it after all. Oh, stop it, Grandpa. She was surprised when her eyes suddenly welled up. End of discussion. Grandpa struggled to stand up. She gave him her shoulder right away. They were beside the coffin now. Ningning felt a knot tightening in her stomach. She had never liked the sight of the coffin in Grandpa's room, but now she had to lie inside it if she didn't want to upset Grandpa, and if she wanted to get through it all. She tried to open the coffin. Its long, bulky lid was incredibly heavy. She managed by gripping its narrow edges as tightly as she could and pushing and lifting until her fingers hurt. A strong smell of fragrant fresh wood greeted her nose. No paint inside, just bare yellowish planks. The heads of those black nails, still visible in the planks, looked intrusive. What should I do? Just jump in? No. You need to drill a hole for some air. That'll ruin it. Well, Grandpa chuckled. I'll need to breathe too if I get to sleep in it at all, right? Oh, please, Grandpa, she giggled too, nervously. Use the scissors, Grandpa instructed. Wrap a towel around your hand, though. She climbed over gingerly, with the scissors in hand, and almost fell flat inside the coffin. Be careful, Grandpa warned, but he was too late. The pointed tips of the scissors barely missed her face. Yes, she needed to be careful, she warned herself. Ningning lay down and moved her arms and legs tentatively. A bit of room to spare all around. Not bad. How do I look, Grandpa? Grandpa did not reply, of course. It's nice down here, really, she assured. She sat up and began to work at the spot on the floor of the coffin. Good. Nobody will see it in there. Grandpa sounded more cheerful. Apply pressure evenly. She didn't make much headway at first. After turning the scissors left and right a few more times, the wood began to crackle and splinter. Some cheap willow, Grandpa murmured. Before long, Ningning had completed one hole. She could put her index finger through it. One more in there or two on the side, and you'll be fine. When she was finally finished, Ningning was exhausted. The muscles in her arms were sore and her wrists hurt. Her fingers had frozen into the shape of gripping the scissors. She could feel heat fermenting inside the cotton-padded winter coat she had on. Very good, Grandpa coughed, wheezing loudly. Grandpa, you need to get back to your bed, she said, climbing out of the coffin. Grandpa moved to the nightstand where Lucky flapped his wings and crooned. Grandpa reached out to touch the cage with his quivering fingers. Let Lucky go, he murmured. He has been with us long enough. Grandpa? Grandpa nodded. Come with me, kiddo, Ningning said, taking the cage from Grandpa. She opened the window in the main room and slid open the door to the cage. Lucky cocked his head this way and that, his beady eyes gazing at her curiously. Yes, you're free to go, she said. Lucky hopped to the opening of the cage, flapped his wings a few times, and leapt into the air. He flew to the prune tree and perched on the young branch which bounced a little under his weight. A few high, melodious notes came from his throat as he turned to look at her one more time, took off, and soared into the sky. Another explosion sounded in the distance. Startled, Ningning abruptly shut the window. She hurried back to help Grandpa get into his bed. Grandpa, she now stood by the coffin and gazed at its interior blankly. Yes? Have you ever seen a Japanese? Yes. What do they look like? Like us. Really? She turned to look at Grandpa. He nodded. Exactly? Grandpa hasted and nodded again.